A new article in Politico highlights how Bernie Sanders is apparently pissing off some establishment Democrats because he might be running for president again in 2020. Now, throughout the article, Politico presents both sides in a seemingly neutral manner. However, while I'm reading you the story, I want you to pay attention to the subtle jabs that the authors include here that are completely unnecessary. And at the end of the article, I'll tell you why they're including these jabs here. And they're not just presenting this in a neutral light. They're not being objective. They're trying to do the bidding of the establishment and also slander Bernie Sanders. So they state, many top Democrats are furious that Bernie Sanders appears to be running for president again, or at least planning to drag out his decision long enough to freeze the race around him. But the senator, who'll be 79 the next time the New Hampshire primary rolls around, is continuing to put himself at the center of the conversation. Some of his moves, like collecting names and email addresses via RSVPs to his Unity tour, with new Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez for his Friends of the Bernie Sanders group, a mailing list that the DNC itself won't have any access to, have alienated his allies on the left. The fact that Tom Perez has given Sanders a platform without Sanders genuinely agreeing to work toward unity has made a mockery of the whole process and literally divided the party more than it was before the tour began. It has been a disaster, said Marcos Molitsas, the founder of the influential liberal Daily Kos site. Yes, Perez and company are clearly afraid of Sanders and his followers, but letting Sanders make a mockery of the party doesn't exactly help it build in the long haul. He's a constant reminder. He allows the healing that needs to take place to not take place, said one longtime senior party official, who, like others, remains too worried about appearing to oppose Sanders to speak on the record. Former DNC Chair Donna Brazil warned party leaders against relying on Sanders unless they're willing to give in on opening the party to more independence like he wants. He's not someone who we should go to build or rebuild or expand our party unless he's willing, she said. Touring the country with Perez, Sanders sought to stamp his economic populism on the head of the DNC, but people familiar with the arrangement said he also spent much of the time traveling with the party chair on their private Gulfstream jet, getting to learn about Perez's personal history, which he hadn't bothered to read up on earlier. If he were to run again, he would almost certainly be by far the most famous entrant, dominating the left and sucking up far more television coverage than he did before. But he would also have 4 years worth of new baggage to contend with, including barbs from Clinton allies who still quietly blame him for her loss. If he doesn't run, progressives are hoping he doesn't turn the Democratic primary race into a 2-year-long audition for his seal of approval. Having that dangling question out there can be a little frustrating, said one Democratic Senate staffer. If he's not going to wind up doing it, is there an issue of an heir apparent, or is it just, this is my thing, I've built this, I take it with me? That's kind of disrespectful to the cause that rallied around him. Every once in a while, you realize that he is in fact an independent, with the good and the bad that comes with it, the staffer added. So in other words, they're angry that Bernie Sanders won't rule out a 2020 run. They still blame him for Hillary Clinton's incompetence. And I want to go through all of the jabs that the authors threw at him. So they included that he'll be 79. They also said that the DNC won't have access to his mailing list. They said that he hadn't bothered to research Tom Perez because Tom Perez is super important. They said he would be the most dominant person on the left if he decides to run, and he'd suck up even more media coverage than he did before, because apparently there wasn't a blackout. We were all dreaming about Bernie Sanders getting virtually no coverage in comparison with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They gave Donald Trump $2 billion worth of free coverage. Bernie Sanders got virtually nothing, but he sucked up all the coverage, and he's going to suck up more coverage than he did before. Give me a break. They also state here that they're hoping that he doesn't turn the Democratic primary race into a 2-year-long audition for his seal of approval. So these are all things that they didn't have to include, that nobody from either side said, that they decided to include. And it's because they're trying to prime you. They want you to think that Bernie Sanders shouldn't run. They want you to think that he's too old to run, or that he's being greedy by not giving up his mailing list to the DNC. But they don't want to overtly say that. So if they prime you, they kind of plant that seed in your head, then maybe you'll come to your own conclusion that, well, maybe Bernie Sanders shouldn't run because he's 79. The article states it. You know, they're not making any direct implications there. They're just stating a fact. Maybe he's too old to run. That's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to be really disingenuous here. Plant these seeds in your head so you think maybe Bernie Sanders shouldn't run. It's incredibly disingenuous. It's a tactic known as priming, and political scientists such as Kinder and Iyengar discovered that this is one of the main tools that the media has to manipulate the public. They discovered this decades ago, and it is still in full effect. So I find this incredibly manipulative because for me, I mean, obviously, I'm the first one to state that there's nothing wrong with you having a preference. For me, you know exactly where I stand. However, it's misleading and shady to pretend to be objective, to pretend to present both sides in a neutral light, when in actuality, what you're trying to do is get people to think about Bernie Sanders in a certain way, when you're not telling them that you do actually have preferences. And we're onto their tricks, and we have to be wary of the media when they do this. This is a strategy that they do, that they've been doing for a really long time, and they do it because it works. So I want to address some of the things here now, getting to the substance of the article. They're blaming Bernie Sanders for the lack of unity, basically. That's what we get. Top Democrats are furious at Bernie Sanders. They're blaming him for the lack of unity. And they're angry that we won't unify behind a corporate finance party. And think about what they did to stifle Bernie Sanders. Never mind that Bernie Sanders, is the most popular politician in the country and that they should all be uniting behind him. But Keith Ellison, when he announced that he would be running to be the next DNC chair, he started to gain a lot of momentum. He got the endorsements from progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but also from establishment figures like Chuck Schumer. So if there was ever going to be a time where unity might be a possibility, it would have been behind someone like Keith Ellison, who wasn't the best progressive, but he's better than Tom Perez. However, what happened? Once Keith Ellison gained a little bit too much momentum, Tom Perez was foisted upon us. President Barack Obama decided to push him into the race and make calls on behalf of Tom Perez to people within the DNC and said, you know what, we've got to go with Tom Perez. So we could have had unity, but instead you decided to put a corporate tool like Tom Perez as the head of the DNC. So if anything, you're stifling unity. So don't give me this bullshit that Bernie Sanders and his supporters are preventing unity. We're not going to unify behind a corporate puppet. And you had your chance. I mean, you could have made Bernie Sanders the DNC chair. You could have made Keith Ellison the DNC chair. You chose the worst possible choice to be the DNC chair. So there could have been unity, but the establishment stopped that. And one thing that pisses me off is that whenever you hear them talking badly about Bernie Sanders, it's always a senior staffer or a Senate official who refuses to go on the record. And they stated that, he's preventing healing from taking place. So the most popular politician in the country with an 85% approval rating among Democrats is the one that's preventing unity from taking place. It's not the establishment who doesn't want Bernie Sanders' agenda to be what the Democrats fight for, because that would go against their corporate donors. It's not that that's preventing unity. It's Bernie Sanders that's preventing the healing. It's not Hillary Clinton and her ilk who refuses to go away, who just lost to Donald Trump, who's historically disliked. They're not causing pain. It's the most popular politician in the country who everyone loves. And I want to get to what Donna Brazile said here, because she's using her words very carefully. She states here that, he's not someone that we should go to rebuild the party unless he wants to. Donna, what do you think he's been doing for the past few months? He's pissing off his own supporters by trying to rebuild the Democratic Party. It's like trying to polish a turd. It still stinks. It still smells like shit. It still looks like shit because it is shit. And Bernie Sanders is still doing that when we desperately want him to join his own party. We're trying to draft him to form a People's Party, but you're sitting here still wondering whether or not he is willing to rebuild the party. That's what he's trying to do. But just say what you really feel, Donna, that you don't want him to rebuild the party because that would remove the corporate influence that they currently have. And that means that the Democratic Party won't get as much money. Just admit that that's what you want. I mean, you don't have to beat around the bush. We know where you stand, Donna. We know where you stand. You helped tip the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton throughout the primaries. You were fired from CNN. We know where you stand. So, your disingenuous little comment here, it's bullshit. Now, what this all tells me is that the party is still out of touch. It's incredibly frustrating that they look at Bernie Sanders as someone who's getting in the way of their plans. No, that's not the way it is. You're getting in the way of our plans because you lost. You guys botched your attempt at winning the presidency for a third consecutive term, and you lost to Donald Trump, a reality TV show buffoon who is historically disliked, you lost to him. So if anyone's stifling unity, if anyone is preventing healing, it's Hillary Clinton who decided to form this stupid super PAC. It's the establishment who refuses to start raising money via grassroots and not through large multinational corporations. They're the ones who are the problem, not Bernie. So if they're furious that Bernie Sanders might run, well, it doesn't matter if Bernie Sanders does or doesn't run, because we have people like Tulsi Gabbard who might run. And best believe that we are not going to fall in line behind a corporate tool. If we've done anything, we've made that clear.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.